For those who fought in the Battle of Britain, it was a battle for survival. For the free world, it was a breathless moment in history. For failure would have plunged mankind into a new dark age. Never have so many owed so much to so few.
So welcome to the next stage of my modding, and what I'm going to be doing is just spraying up these extra bits so that we can assemble the engine together, and then that will bring us up to date with issue 34. So what I've done is I've taken the parts that need to be added green. These are the engine supports. I've taken off all of the little extra bits there. That's just for ease of painting. Now you can mask them off. What I think is going to be easy is to remove them, and then obviously these little coppery bits, I'm going to repaint those in by hand later on. But on the whole, all of these just need to be done cockpit green. I'm using a company called Roots Model Paint. These colour match Humbrol paints. In these current times, sometimes it's really hard to get hold of certain colours of paints. And this company, little tiny bit more expensive by the time you add the postage, but they've got an exact colour match. So what I'm going to do is I need my paint, I need my thinners, and this time I'm going to be using the airbrush. Now this is an Iwata Revolution CR. That's all I can really tell you about it. I'm not a big expert on airbrushes. For this particular job, any airbrush will do, because we're only doing a base paint over it. So let me show you what I'm doing. So I've got my airbrush, and I'm just going to pop in a little bit of thinner, and then give this paint a really good shake, and we're going to just drop a little bit into there. And what we're going to do is we're going to then add some more thinner. Now I always add thinners, a little bit of thinner first, because I believe that the first little bit, whatever you put in first, that will be the first bit out of the airbrush. So if you pop in paint first, you know, you get a little bit of paint go through the nozzle. The paint's too thick, and then it blocks the nozzle up. So I'd rather have a little bit of nothing come out first, and I'm just going to give that a test spray. And if anything that's too thin, you can't actually see that, but that is probably too thin rather than too thick. That's absolutely fine. It just means that we'll be adding more layers. So give that a little test on an old piece, and actually I think that's about right. So what I'm doing with the airbrush is I'm giving a pass with paint by pulling back on the nozzle, just a gentle. We're only bringing out a little bit of paint, and then I'm giving it a couple of passes just with the air, and I don't know if you can see that, but that's pretty much dry already. So if I show you on this side, a little bit of paint, there it is, and then a couple of passes so that you see the shine where it's wet, a couple of passes with air, a bit more paint, and then we just keep going until we're happy with the coverage. If you don't get this covered evenly, don't worry, because we're still going to be weathering it up. And I've actually used all my paint on that, can you believe that? So I'm just going to make up a bit more. This is quite often why I will make up a tiny batch, and I'll see how far it goes, and then I'll compare that with what I need to paint. So this particular thinner that I have is Vallejo thinner, and then after I use up my Vallejo thinner, I'll be using some Tamiya thinner, but after that I'll be making my own thinners up. Right, I think I'm happy with that. So you'll notice that I've got everything on a piece of cardboard. This is to help me spray it better. So I won't get so much spray on my hands. I should be using a glove anyway. And all we'll do is we'll just, and remember we're going to move our hands, not the airbrush. We need to make the parts work for us. And so there's the first coat on. It's not a good coverage, it never will be, but then we'll give that a second pass. So I don't know, I mean it's not a great coverage yet. You will need a few passes. But you can see it's just changed the colour a little bit. It's darkened it slightly compared to this. I do apologise about the light. It's just not really that good. And that one's going to come off, I think. And I'll go back over the first one. And see, I'm making the parts work, not me. Oops, that's fallen off. To be honest with you, I think this is a bit of a convenient break point anyway, because I'm just starting to run out of paint in the airbrush. Some people will absolutely fill up their airbrush. I like to put small amounts in at a time. So what I'll do is I'll speed the rest of this up to show me painting. So I'm happy with the coverage on there. Now what's actually happened is there's been the odd little bit where I've just not been able to get quite such good coverage. Let's just redo that bit. So there's little tiny bits where there's slightly more coverage than other areas, and that's absolutely fine, because so I'm a bit of a, I notice things as I'm talking about them. So yeah, so you've got little bits where maybe in the corners you haven't got quite so much, and then other bits where you've got really good coverage, and that's absolutely fine because that represents wear and tear over time, and I think these are dry enough to handle. Yeah, so it just represents a bit of wear and tear. If you wanted it brand spanking new, as it would look off the factory line, then what you would be looking at is doing a nice even coverage all over. Don't worry about the nooks and crannies, we will be sorting all of that out later on. So what I'll do, actually there's a bit that's been completely untouched, we'll just sort that bit out now. See, even I miss bits. So we'll wait for that to dry, and then we can start building up the detail on this bulwark. For the next stage, what we're going to do is we're going to try and restore these copper pipes. You see that I've sprayed over them with the green, and the colours that I'm going to use. When we did the copper pipes before, we used a 3-tone copper. I'm just going to go with 2 stages this time. I'm going to do a base coat of aged copper, and then I'm going to finish it off with polished. These are very small, and I don't think they're going to be as visible as the other pipes. So I've got some form of palette, and I've got some thinner. Metallics I tend to thin with thinners. A lot of paints, acrylic paints, you can thin with water. Some metallics you will get away with thinning with water. These particular ones, Dark Star, don't ever thin them with water. We've given it a go and it really doesn't work. So what I'll do is I'll just pop a little bit onto there, and how much you thin them, really, it depends on the paint. And what you tend to find is that as you get experience with that particular manufacturer of paint, you just know what's enough. I know for molten metals that will be absolutely fine. Now, because we're dealing with a very small area, we need a very good brush, of which that may not actually be good enough because that's a little bit frayed. So bear with me while I find a really good brush. I don't just need a really good brush, I need a really good fine brush. So it looks like this is going to be the one. That's a bit better, but right, and what I'm going to try and do is I'm just going to edge highlight, what's called edge highlight. Remember earlier on in another video I told you about using the edge of your paintbrush, and we're just going to, using the edge, go carefully, we're just going to restore those lines, and we're just painting the raised edges. We're not going to get right down into the corner, and there's a reason for that. We're going to do some panel washing, so we will sort that out at a later stage. So I'm going to crack on with this. Okay, so I've done the first layer. I've made a couple of mistakes. It's not going to be a problem, we can tidy that up later. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go for a highlight colour, and I'm just going to go over all of that, but I'm not going to go all the way to the edges. In fact, it might even be an idea if we just dotted the paint around rather than actually painted it on. And put enough thinner in there. Instead of putting a drop, I put a bubble in. So let's have a look, see how we can do. But I don't want to go all the way to the edges. I want to use this as a highlight. And unfortunately, I will need to be more careful than I was before, but I don't want to cover the whole lot up. There we go. So can you see the difference that's made? Again, we're looking at subtle differences. Obviously the green isn't subtle. The green is what we consider a correction. But with the pipes, they're just quite subtle. I don't think you need to be going and rewriting all the rules on weathering. I think we just do subtle. I mean, obviously if you want to weather this to death, that's absolutely fine, and I've seen some people do a really good job, but like I've said before, we want to make this look used, not used out. So struggling a bit there, so I'm just dotting it on. It's just a bit of an awkward angle for me. And I'm just turning the piece so it's convenient for me, and I'm just trying to use the very ends of the brush. There we go. Very happy with that. So what I'll do now, if I can find it, is I will just get my cockpit green, and then I can just go around and I can just fix any errors that I've made. So clean my brush. Don't want to put too much thinner in it. I don't want this paint runny. And then any areas of concern, we can just slip our brush in. There we go. There's a bit of a fix there. Bit of a fix there. Bit of a tidy up. and just in there. Don't go in with a fully loaded brush. And I don't know what's happened on the edges there, but I'm not happy with that. So we'll just touch that up, and there, I think I'm really happy with that. So we need to let that fully dry. Overnight is preferable, but a good couple of hours is fine. And then what we'll do is we will assemble, we'll bring the engine in, we will assemble the engine, and then we will do a little bit more weathering on it. I've got a new product I want to show you. At the time of recording I've not actually used it, but it's called panel line wash, and it just accents all those little angles and things, just like we did before on a previous piece. So the next bit is to reassemble the engine, and there's nothing here that you haven't seen before. We're just going to pop these little side bits in, and then we're going to pop the engine in and assemble the rest of it. And like I say, it's nothing you've never seen before, so I'm just going to crack on and get on with it. Okay, so got a confession to make. This panel line wash, I've never ever used it before, so I'm going to do a little practice here. Now this engine is going to go in like so, and one area that's going to be hidden up is this part here. So I'm going to do a little panel wash there, knowing that if I get it wrong, it's all going to get covered up and we don't need to worry. So the way that we do this panel wash, now when I asked for this, I did ask for Tamiya panel wash, because that's the videos and things I've been studying. I have been told this is exactly the same, if not better. But saying that, the guy in the shop, he's a tank builder, and I know this ammo MiG seems to be favoured by tank builders. I don't know why. I think they specialise in tank things. Now this is enamel odorless thinner. This is essentially white spirit. The reason I didn't get white spirit is because I'm working 5-6 days a week. I do struggle to get to places like the DIY store. So although I know this is a very false economy, it was there. So what I'm told we have to do is we do a panel wash, and then we let it dry for a little bit, 5-10 minutes, and then we get a cotton bud damp with thinners, and then we just wipe as much as we can off, and that will leave accented panel wash, accents in the panel wash. So we'll try this little bit in the middle first, and we'll see what happens. And not an awful lot. So maybe I've not mixed it up enough, shaken it enough. Maybe the panel wash is too subtle. And this is an enamel, so this won't dry like instantly like our acrylic washers. Ah, look at that. So did you notice when I touch it, it all runs all around the edges? That's exactly what I was expecting it to do. So we just dab a load around the edges like so, let it sit for a minute, and what I'm doing for damp cotton bud is I'm actually touching it in the thinners, and then I'm just wiping as much off as I can. And then what we'll do, see, and we just wipe it off, and that is, I would put that in the brilliant category. And it's actually taken the paint off. So right, what, of course, what I needed to do was varnish that. So that's okay. I'm going to do a little bit of cheating. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the panel wash on carefully, and I'll just do these bits. There we go. So next time I do any panel washers, I'll just give it a coat of varnish, and that varnish will lock in the colour. But that's okay, I'm really liking that. That's really added something. So I'll just continue doing the panel wash all over, just hitting any areas like this. And this seems to go thin very, very quickly. I noticed that when I shook it and used it straight away, it was a lot stronger. And then as I've left it for a minute or two, it seems to have weakened out a bit. There we go, look. And then I'll give that a very light, more of a dab than anything, to be honest with you. So if we look at this side, try and get some focus and compare it to the other side, you see that it's added so much more interest. And obviously this is inside the engine, so you would get a lot of dirt and grime in there. It doesn't matter how much you clean it, it's going to be a bit mucky, isn't it? Perhaps I should have thought about panel washing these bits beforehand. They certainly would have been easier. Look at that, it just runs straight through. So I do apologise, this is a bit of a discovery for me. I do like this. It doesn't really need so much wiping, does it? But as I do keep stressing, it is an enamel. Which means it's going to have a longer drying time, so we can't really do anything further with this probably until tomorrow, but that I'm really happy with, and that will die down a little bit as it dries. Brilliant, love that. It's got a bit of a pong to it, but nothing too major. It smells, well, it smells of gloss paint, to be honest with you. So that's not really much of a pong, is it? So I'm discovering that, I say this is the first time I've used this, I'm discovering that you really need to shake the pot every few minutes, but that is absolutely spectacular. I'm really happy with that, and look at the difference it makes. Really happy. So I wonder if we should have used it on the engine rather than the wash that I used, and I think the answer to that is a resounding yes. That's done such a much better job there. because it doesn't really want to sit on the flat surfaces. It wants to run into the edges, and that's the areas that we want to accent. Look at that. Right, okay, so we'll let that die down a little bit, and then we'll install the engine. And then after we've installed the engine, we can crack on with these supports. Okay, so I am really sorry. I seem to have lost the footage. I think what I did is I hit the I must have hit the wrong button and I stopped it when I meant to start it. So I have reinstalled the engine all properly. I've just touched up any of the panel wash where I felt it was needed. There was a couple of little bits where I've over dry brushed it with the grey, so I just got some really watered down black and I just scrubbed over it just to tone it down a bit, and that's basically the stage it's at now. So what I'm trying to do now is I want to get this back panel in, so I need to, obviously all these little bits that I've pulled off it, I need to put those back in, and then I need to panel wash it, and then the same with this. And yeah, so I'm just going to crack on with it. So you will see my magazine come out. This is yet another reason to keep magazines. If you ever need to go back and refer to anything, there it is. So I've got some glue at the ready, I've got my cocktail stick, I've got my tweezers, so I'm now going to assemble all of this again. Okay, so that is all in place, and I do apologise, I'm having such problems with my lighting today. Wherever I put the light, it's just not doing a good job. Right, so what we need to do now is put into these struts, and I can't remember if they're glued in. No, they're not glued in, so they need to go in with these edges out. There we go, that one's in place and that one's in place, and this is quite good because we haven't weathered this. This is actually going to show us exactly how good or bad the weathering is. I'm also going to get a couple of screws ready, 2 PM 2x4s, which I don't want that one, that's a black one. Don't think it'd make a difference though, would it? Right, so ooh, it still smells a bit of the enamel. So it smells just like gloss paint. Yeah, I think it's going to be easy to put this bit in first. I'm just wondering if anybody's glued theirs in. It doesn't say to glue it in, does it? But you can see how some people would think it would be easier. In fact, if anything, it's just made it harder for me. Yeah. These are the fiddly bits, aren't they? I mean, not as fiddly as issue 11. Don't know about you, but I did enjoy issue 11. It was a real challenge. But I don't even remember doing this issue the first time round. Almost there. Almost. That's what screwing in, isn't it? I'm wondering if placing this in a clamp might have been easier. Certainly focus on one side and hold that one side in, and then work on the other side. I know a couple of builders have got this to come. That's going to be interesting, isn't it? Well, I know that's not in, and I can see it's not in, but I can't seem to locate the hole. There you go, that's just clicked in, but I don't think that's in right. No. You know, when you kind of, you hear a click, and then you hear something clicking out of place. But that I am happy with. So if we could just get that to hold there. If we can just get one screw in, no problems. Lovely, lovely. Now I was going to thread lock these screws in because they have been unscrewed and then screwed back in. I don't seem to have any though, so I'm going to take a bit of a chance. But I don't think it's going to be a major problem. I say an awful lot about Harshep. They do overdo the screws. They put far too, well, I say far too many, that sounds like a negative. They put too many in. They put more than is necessary. Some of the other builds, you know, we've had perhaps 12 or 16 screws when just 3 or 4 would have done the job. Right, so that is in. So you can now see a big difference between this part and the part that's been weathered. So what I'll do now is I'll lift my camera up a little bit more just to give me a bit more room, and then we'll carry on, and we'll just bring this up to spec. Maybe I should have weathered this before I put it on. I think we'll get away with that though. You'll also notice that I am putting my propeller blades down on the ground. I have already previously chipped them, so what I'm going to do is when I finish the build I will be touching up these propeller blades, but if I do them now there's going to be many opportunities to chip them again, so I may as well just wait and not worry about them too much. So I'll speed the camera up and I will get on with this weathering, and then hopefully we'll have a good result. Okay, so that is the engine, and I am really happy with this. So if you have already watched my my issue 34, you will see this actually on the Spitfire. Do you know what, I'm just going to give that a bit of a touch up as well. As I say, oops, I've just discovered what happens if you shake a bottle up with the lid not on properly. This is another reason why I like to use acrylic products, because the cleanup is so much easier. I think I've got away with that. The lid was just not quite on properly, but there we go. So remember guys, this is an 80-year-old aeroplane. So I think if we just get rid of some of that shininess, then I think that will just help a lot. The one exception to my rule is, let me just give this bottle a wipe because it's going to make a mess otherwise. So the one exception to my rule is this Rolls-Royce sign, I want that to be as pristine and lovely as possible. I think whoever owns this Spitfire on this particular day, he's really proud of this. You know, he's going to keep the engine fairly clean. He's going to make it all nice as he can. Obviously he can't do absolutely everything, but that little Rolls-Royce sign, I think that's just the kind of thing that you look at and you go, yeah, I own that. So he's probably going to polish that 10 times a day, every single day. So there you go, guys. That is my weathered engine. I've got to admit, I was a tad worried about it, but I just think it's perfect. I'm really happy with that, and I hope you guys are too.